Welcome, friends. Thank you for joining me for another All Hands on Tech with your host, David Neal, Pluralsight Developer Advocate. I hope you're doing well. We are in the process of working on a multiplayer real-time trivia game together. And this is some pretty interesting technology to work with. Now, if you've watched any of these episodes that I've been hosting, you know that I'm a fan of Node.js and JavaScript. And the reason is JavaScript, although it can be a quirky language and have, it's got a pretty storied past, it has gotten so much better over the last 10 years. And there is so much you can do with the language. If you want to build web applications, of course, JavaScript is the language for the web, the language on the front end. But you can also build server-side applications. You can build desktop applications. You can automate devices, Internet of Things. You can create games like we're doing on these series of streams. And you can build mobile apps. Anything and everything you can build with software and technology, you can do it with JavaScript. I think that's extremely powerful. It's an amazing community and language that has so much available. So I have no hesitation at all to recommend JavaScript as a tool in the tool belt for people in technology, whether they want to automate some things or create applications, especially if you're doing anything related to the web. JavaScript is a fantastic way to go and a great skill to have. So I hope, through these series of streams, you can pick up on some tips and tricks and learn a few things here and there. And if you have any questions along the way, I'd love to answer those for you. So if you have any questions related to Node or JavaScript or any of the other technologies that we're using, or you just have, something you want to ask about a career in technology and software, time permitted, I would love to hear any of your questions or feedback. So the game that we're creating is built with Node.js. We're using some technologies like Socket.io to do real-time communications. We're using Fastify to host the application to act as the back-end server. Later on, we'll start to add some other technologies to the mix, like probably Vue as the front end. We may use, some type of storage technology. We may look at, the different hosting options that are available to like deploy the application. There's a lot to cover in the coming weeks ahead. If you are interested in following along and playing with the source code as we create it yourself, you can get that on my GitHub repository. If you go to github.com/reverentgeek/ahot-trivia-game, the link is there on the screen. Go get the source code, download it, and as a matter of fact, I've got up on the screen one thing I did since the last time we met was I updated the README that's associated with the project, giving you some instructions. So if you want to run this locally, one thing I didn't put in here, dependencies. You need Node.js LTS. currently 16. And you can get this on Node.js.org, I believe. Let me double check that. Yep. So if you go to Node.js .org, you can download version 16, currently version 16.18. Now that brings up also, I've said this on a lot of different screencasts that I personally use a system called MVM to manage the versions of Node that I have installed on my computer. So if I go here, it shows up in my prompt because I'm using a fancy prompt called Spaceship, which I really like. Gives me a lot of heads up stuff in my project. It's the Morton. Thank you. Thank you for the encouragement. Yes, it's and yeah, I'm using light mode, and I'm doing so on purpose. I personally, when I'm coding, and a lot of times I will use a dark mode to create software. And it's a little bit easier on the eyes, right? That's been the trend. But when I'm presenting, and when especially if I'm in a live audience situation where I've got some code up on the screen and there's a projector, projectors typically don't have as good of contrast as our computer screens do. And I find that the black text on white backgrounds is far more readable in a lot of situations than the reverse, light text on dark. So I do light mode for readability, and so appreciate your your comment there. So what I was getting to was I've got Node here. If I do MVM ls, it will list the versions of Node that I have installed. I use Node Version Manager, which I highly recommend if you're on Linux, Mac, or if you're using the Linux subsystem for Windows. Definitely install MVM to manage your versions of Node. So I am a version behind. If I type the command MVM ls-remote 16, I can see I'm on version 16.17.1, and there's a newer version available. So I will install 16 and let that download and run. Fun fact, when using projectors, use Comic Sans to improve readability. Well, I unironically use Comic Sans in one of my presentations about the topic of JavaScript. One of the talks that I give is on the history of JavaScript and some of the quirkiness and things that still exist in the language that can frustrate developers. And Comic Sans is actually a pretty readable font, and it's funny. Um, Trivia. All right. So we got 16.18 installed. And another thing I do on a periodic basis, once a week, once every couple of weeks, is I will check to see if there are any packages in the project that I'm working on that are outdated. And I can see that ESLint and Fastify are both out of date, so I can run npm update. And let's double check. Everything's up to date. Oh, you've been looking at me instead of looking at my screen. Sorry about that. So I installed a newer version of npm or MVM version of Node 16.18, and I updated the dependencies that are in the project. Let me close this. So I updated hint, use NVM to manage your versions of Node.js. And let me make sure I got the right link for that. So the setup instructions are clone or download and unzip the source code, run npm install to install any of the dependencies, make a copy of the .env.sample and rename it to .env, and then make any changes to .env. There's not a whole lot in there right now. There's a host name and a port for where the server is going to the web server is going to run. But over time, we may want to add more configuration settings, environment settings to this file. Say, for example, we decide to use a database of some kind. We may want to include a connection string in the environment file so that the application knows how to connect to the database. And this is, environment specific. It's not something you would normally check into source code because it's specific to your current environment, and two, you may be putting some secrets in this environment file, such as a connection string or logins or API keys or something like that you may use as part of the application. So npm run dev to start the application. Let's just go ahead and do that right now. And the developer mode, as we covered either last week or a couple of weeks ago, is using a nice developer tool called Nodemon to start the application, and it monitors any changes to files in the project and automatically restarts the server, which is really convenient. So then you can open up your browser, navigate to port 8080, and right now we just have, one basically hello world view that we're rendering. I'm gonna let's see. I'm gonna hide the caption or the caption at the bottom. If you do need to know the URL for the source code, you can always ping me for that at any time. All right, so where we got to is we kind of finished last week setting up Fastify and Socket.io. We got that working. If we look at the console in the browser, might be kind of hard for you to read, but it says "Hey client" was logged to the console, and that is because in the server, on the server side, when everything is set up and ready and a client makes a connection over WebSockets, we log that message to the console. So socket connection made, that's right here in the console on the server side, and we send a message to the client on a channel called hello, and the message is, or the data that we're sending is a string that says "Hey client." And then on the client side, we've got an import IO from Socket.io. We're creating an instance of Socket.io, and then we're listening for any messages sent on the channel hello. And we're saying whatever the data that's being sent to this channel, we're calling it that data message, and we're logging that to the console. So that kind of lets us know that our WebSockets are working. So the foundation is in place. And one of the things that I went ahead and did just before getting on the stream is I wrote a kind of a roadmap of some of the tasks that we're going to be working on over the coming weeks as we do this, build this application together and do these streams together. Now these tasks may change over time. And I didn't specify any technologies in here too, because as I've mentioned before, we may want to use something like Vue for the front end. And there's, lots of other technologies we could incorporate. I will tell you, I haven't made this knowledge, necessarily public. No good reason. I probably should have let you know before, but this game that I'm building is inspired by, if not directly taken directly from, an actual game that I'm building for Pluralsight, for the AWS reInvent conference coming up at the end of November. Cool thing about it is the events team, the brand team came to me and said, hey, we got this idea for a game we'd like to run at the booth at the AWS reInvent conference. What do you think of this idea? And I said, after they explained what they wanted, I said, that is an amazing idea. I want to do that. Please let me build it for you. And please let me talk about it and share the journey and the experience on streaming and other mechanisms. So you're part of this journey that I'm on, building an actual game for the AWS reInvent conference. So what you're going to be hopefully learning along the way is what I'm learning as I'm building this app for Pluralsight. So these tasks that I've got listed here: define game states, show and hide HTML, like blocks of information based on the state, the current state of the application. Allow players to enter a name and join a game. The first player can choose to start a game. You can see that if you've played some of these trivia type games or silly games that are hosted on the internet, there's a lot of similarities. I took inspiration from online games that I've played. So as soon as everyone joins, the first person can start the game. There's a countdown timer that lets everyone know that the game is about to start. Then there's, when the game starts, there's also a game timer. Say the game is designed to run for 60 seconds or 2 minutes, something like that. And each player answers as much trivia as they can. And then if everyone, the game ends when either the time is up or everyone playing has answered all the questions. Then the game will calculate the winner, and there may be like a scoreboard. We may go as far as like creating a leaderboard that, over time, the people who have scored the highest, are shown at the top of the leaderboard, that kind of thing. And then a way to reset the game and start it all over again. So those are kind of the high level tasks that we want to create. And we'll check these off. We might even use maybe the project tasks in GitHub to suggest ideas and to track the work that we're doing on this stream together. So today, over the next 40 minutes or so, I want to see if we can define some states and come up with some initial basic logic to show and hide different parts of the UI based on the current state of the game. And then maybe, if we get that far, allow a player to enter a name and, join a game and kind of start the flow of moving from one state to the next. So when thinking about a game and the different states of the game, what I imagine is, let's say, game states. There's like a welcome or a home state. So it's like a information page of like, here's information about the game, how it works, kind of thing. There's a join screen. So it's like enter your name and click join. There's a waiting for other players to join. So you've already joined the game or you've entered your name. The game has maybe assigned you a character or a color or a combination of both to be like your avatar in the game along with your name. And you're just sitting there waiting for the game to start. All the players have joined the game, let's say there is a pre-game countdown. So here's a screen where the message may be something like all the players are in, the game is about to start. So it maybe count down from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then game starts. Gameplay is the next state where you answer different trivia questions. Maybe there's ways of earning bonus points. Who knows? There may be, whatever kind of creative, fun stuff we might be able to, take a look at that. And then there is game over, like the time's up, kind of message that kind of happens for maybe a few seconds to let everyone know that the game is over. And then finally a game results, like our scoreboard, where you can see how you ranked among the other players and whether or not you were the winner, right? And then there may be a way to reset the game, in this state, and it would take you back to that welcome/home state. So there may be other states that we want to define. There may be, other workflows or scenarios that we want to be able to support. But this is kind of the set of states that I, thought of. If you have suggestions or comments or anything, please post those in the chat. I'd love to get your feedback. Does this seem reasonable? So I'm going to take this information and come over here to our game server. This is our back-end server using Fastify. And we've went through this code in previous streams. If you want to go and watch any of those previous streams, they're available on YouTube, on Pluralsight's YouTube channel. So if you can just search through and find the AHOT live streaming stuff, you can find those, the All Hands on Tech developer streams. And in a nutshell, we're creating an instance of Fastify. We're reading in our environment configuration, setting up some plugins, and then setting up some. Right now, we just have one route that is the home page, which is just going to send index.html to the browser, and then sets up some connections. Now, probably before, if not immediately, I will want to refactor this code to separate the game logic from this kind of initialization of the web server. So why don't we just go ahead and do that now? So in the source folder, I'm going to create a file and call it gameserver.js, and this will be our server-side logic. First thing I need to do is add a use strict up at the top of the page. And if you've seen any of my previous streams, you know that I'm a fan of always using strict on Node.js server-side code if you are in the camp of still using common JS modules. Strict mode is not turned on by default. Now, if you're using ES modules where you're using things like import and export, strict mode is turned on by default. So in this game server, I am going to take the Fastify. We're registering Fastify sockets. Let's see. When the server's ready, let's go ahead and pull in our dependency up here. Let's say game server equals require game server. And with Node, you don't have to specify the .js extension unless, well, there's used to, you didn't have to specify any extensions. If you're using ES modules, or if you're using MJS as a way, which is ES modules mixed with common JS, then you do have to specify the extension. Like if you were to create a mixture of common JS and ES modules, you would have to specify extension. But by default, if you're just using common JS, you don't have to specify the .js extension. So in our game server module, let's say we have a method. Whoop, can't type. We have a method on game server called start. We may want to, refactor that at some point or come up with a better name. I don't know, but we'll pass the current server as as an argument, so that on the other side we can do this logic. So I'm going to cut that and put that in our game server. So over here, we're going to create a function start that takes in server as an argument. We're going to paste in our code that when a connection is made, send that message. And then we need to export that function. This is the magic of syntax of Node.js, is anything you want to expose outside of your JavaScript file has to be through module.exports. So the only thing that's visible from the outside of gameserver.js is this one function called start. We could have other functions in here, which would essentially be private, as until they were listed in this list of module.exports. So we got our game server start. So we haven't changed any logic. We've just refactored where the game logic exists. We put it in a separate module. So the game, the quote game that we have so far should be identical in functionality as what we had before. So if I go to the browser, you'll see that, as I made changes to the JavaScript code, Nodemon was continuing to restart the server because it's still running, and it was crashing because I wasn't finished with all the refactoring. But now that I did finish, it is running, and a socket connection has been made. So the browser window that I had open before, and this will be interesting to see, while I was refactoring and the server was crashing, I got a bunch of messages logged here in the console that it could not connect to the server. But as soon as I finished all my refactoring and the server was good again, then it connected, and here's the hey client message logged to the console. So cool. Glad to see everything is working as before. All right. So we've got in our game server our start. What I want to do is I want to define what are those states that we were talking about. And they're in the README. I want to take these game states and turn these into like constants, or if we were using something like C# or Java, or some other language besides JavaScript that supports enums, we might turn this into an enumeration of values. We can kind of get an enumeration in JavaScript, but it's nothing fancy. Let's, instead of doing an enumeration, let's just create a states object that includes home, a join awaiting state. Let's call this one countdown. That's that pre-game that, the game is about to start. Active, maybe, is the game is currently being played. Game over would be like that transition between the active and the score. And let's call this final state score. Okay. Now let's delete this. So when the server first starts, or whenever there is the game resets. Move this out of the way. Whenever the game resets, let's set the current state back to home. So in what I'm thinking that all the logic for the game and the current state of the game will be in this start function. So inside the start function, we'll say state equals states.home. And let's see, we have players. It's like an empty array. And let's see, what are some other things we might do? I'm going to create a function called sendState. And all it's designed to do is just to broadcast to all the clients the current state of the game. So we'll say socket.emit state and just the current state. So when a connection is made, rather not naively at the moment, we'll just say send state. So a client makes a connection, the server will send the current state to that client, and the client can then, update its UI based on the current state of the game. The client over here, instead of just listening for hello, we'll listen for state. And let's just log that for now. That should really be very little difference. Oh, so good thing I have ESLint because it's warning me that I've got this socket.emit and I don't really have a socket. So the fix for that is going to be server.io.emit. And the server.io.emit is kind of like the global emit is going to broadcast that to every client, whereas the send state down here is or this connection is a socket that is only for that client. So there may be a case for that we don't need to broadcast this active state to every client. Maybe it's just the one that's connecting that we need to send state information to. So let's pass the socket, and if the socket exists, we'll do socket return socket.emit. So if a socket is specified, then it will just send the message to that socket and not to every client. Otherwise, send state will be like send this message or send this current state to all the clients. Okay. So we're running. Socket connection has been made. As you can see, there's lots of error messages here. I'm going to clear the console, and we made changes to the actual source code for the client as well. So I'm going to refresh the client, and as you can see that a new socket connection was made. And this time, instead of logging "Hey y'all" to the console, it's logging home, which is the current state of the game. So now we can use that state to start to change the behavior of the client, of the front end. And let's take a look at that code. So right now we've got on the client the following code. We're just logging the state. And the view is this. So let's get a little more sophisticated, and let's say let's call this a hot trivia game, and let's start creating some like placeholders for the states of the different states of the game. So we may have an ID for home. Information about the game, and a button for someone to start a new game. And by default, let's say this class is hidden. What does that mean? Well, let's just create some styles inside the HTML. It's no big deal. We'll refactor all this at some point to use like maybe Tailwind or some other good CSS framework to make this better. But like all good developers, I don't remember off the top of my head. I know there's like visibility and some other CSS classes that deal with that, that deal with the visibility of elements, but I don't remember off the top of my head what that is. So let's toggle visibility with CSS. And of course, we got W3 schools shows up. There's other ones. I like relying on MDN. So there's visibility. Maybe this is what we need. So we'll create a hidden class, and we'll say visibility is hidden. I don't know if this will work or not. Let's leave the class off for now. Let's refresh the page, and we got information about the game, start a game. If I come in here and I edit this element directly and change the class to hidden, it works. However, here's the interesting thing about using visibility. So when you hide an element using the visibility class, it still takes up space. So this whatever space it would normally take up is still kind of reserved for that element, at least if I recall correctly. Let me make sure I'm telling you the right thing. Let's come down here and let's create another div. Let's call this one join. And we'll have an input and so forth to do this. Let's come over to, let's set this one to hidden, refresh the page, and yeah. So what I was telling you was correct. If it's hidden, if the visibility is turned off, it just changes the visibility of that element, but it still takes up space. So join is now further down the page. We don't just want to have visibility turned off. We want it to act as though that element does not exist. And I want to say it's the display property. Maybe not. Display none. Is that a thing? Yeah, display none. So now we refresh the page, we get what we'd want. So we need to show and hide pieces of content based on this hidden state. So we could do that manually through setting styles on classes, but I'd rather just, kind of wrap some of this logic up into a CSS class and then set that class on the element. So by default, let's hide every state of the game. Okay. And then based on the state that's received, we'll show and hide state. This is not ideal, but I'm going to take the same list of states that I'm using on the server side, and I'm going to paste those in the client. We'll probably figure out a better way of solving that at some point. But for now, let's just copy the states around. And when we receive a state, from the server, move this up. Whoops. Here. When we receive a state from the server, let's show that state on the client. Let's say show state. I'm going to try to be a little clever and say all the IDs for the elements are going to be the same as the list of states. So let's create a function that hides all. And we'll say for I can never remember if it's state in states or states, state of states. I usually get it wrong. One of these days, I'll remember the difference. So MDN JavaScript for of loop. And yes, it's for const element of array. So state of states for every state in states, which means I need to change this to an array. Home, join. There's probably a better way to have both, to have like an array and like an object that has properties that we can use like an enumeration. That would be cool. If you happen to know a way to do that, post that in the comments. Otherwise, we'll just continue on my limited JavaScript knowledge. I'm not necessarily a guru at everything. I know some things. And I've been using JavaScript now for long time. And there's still things that elude me. Okay, so for every state, let's say element equals it's a document dot get element by ID. And we'll use the state if element dot class list dot contains if element and does not contain the class name hidden, then class list add hidden. I don't know if that'll work or not. It seems right. So if the element does not already have hidden as a class name, then add hidden as a class name. And just to see if this works, I'm going to add at the bottom of this script, hide all. Let's rename that to hide all, not hides all. I can do that with F2. Okay, hide all, and then here we'll leave these empty. So if it works, then the only thing we should see on the page is the header. If it doesn't work, then we'll see both of these elements and some complaints in the JavaScript console, probably. So let's see if that works. Refresh. Hey, it's hidden. Both of them are hidden. They both have a class of hidden. Perfect. So let's have them hidden by default. And then in the show state, we'll say we'll hide all the elements first, and then get the element that we're looking for and say if EL and EL, well, we know it's going to have hidden. We just added it to every one of them. If EL dot class list dot remove hidden. So now come down here, we should be able to say show state, and then whatever state the server passes to the client, it should display that portion of the UI. And let's remove the hide all down here. Now, if we refresh the page, we see home. And if I want to, say, start a new game, there'll be some server logic too involved in starting a game. But for now, let's just make this a client thing. Again, what's the JavaScript document ready equivalent? Good old Stack Overflow. Because I'm used to using front end frameworks that I don't have to think about this much anymore. But there's still a case to be made to knowing the kind of vanilla JavaScript ways of doing things. And this is the one that I'm thinking of. So after the document has loaded, let's set up a I'm thinking of client JavaScript. We don't have to do this. We can just say adding a click event listener in JavaScript. We can do it by get element, or I was hoping to see what the declarative way is. Like where you add it to the element itself. Inline event handler, maybe. Yeah, it's just on click. So on click. We'll just call it start. And in the here in the document, let's say function start. And all we're going to do is update the state from home to join. And just say show state join. Forget this one for now. So just really low tech. We got our game. If I hit start a new game, oh, it did not work. Start is not defined. I thought I saved it. Oh, I put, no. What did I do wrong? There's start. Got it. Refresh the page. I don't see the problem. What if I add this to this directly? What would that do? Show state is not defined. Well, we've got the client. Well, maybe the declarative way, for whatever reason, may not work. So let's just give the button an ID of start game. And back here, the document dot, and I've already forgotten what the add listener is. Start button is document.getElement by ID start game. If start button, and we'll add back to one of our previous examples. Add event listener, click. Let's see if that works. Refresh the page, click start game, and now we got join. Okay, that worked. I don't know why the other one didn't work. Maybe it's because I had parentheses in the JavaScript on click and shouldn't have. I don't know. Maybe that was it. But this actually is maybe a little bit better way of doing it anyway. We made some progress. You know, we've talked about the tasks that we wanted to do. We defined the states of the game. We talked about a number of challenges that we, and decisions that we'll have to make somewhere down the road. But we've got a very rudimentary game state engine that we're starting to create here, where you can, transition from one state to another and be able to show and hide different parts of the UI based on the current state. So I think this is a good stopping point. I'm going to commit the source code that we have right now, the changes that we've made, so that if you want to play around with what we've done so far, you can certainly do that. game server and client in progress with game states. I'll push that. And just out of curiosity, I'm going to switch over here to the screen so that you can see the source code link. If you go to github.com/reverentgeek/ahot-trivia-game, AHOT being all hands on tech, not that I'm, and you'll be able to grab the source code for that and play around with it. I'd love to get your feedback. If you have any questions about what we've done so far or where we may be headed in the future, post those in the comments. Tell me what you like about this so far, or what you don't like about it so far, and let me know how I can improve and make this a better learning experience for you. And this is going to be some fun stuff to create together. So if you have any suggestions or recommendations on what you'd like to see in this game that we're creating, let me know. You can post those. The best place would be to actually put it in the repository. So if you were to add an issue to that GitHub repository that we can track there, that would be perfect. And I am Reverent Geek everywhere. If you're on Twitter, I'm Reverent Geek on Twitter. My website is reverentgeek.com. There's multiple ways to get in contact with me if you have any questions. And until next time, I hope you have a great week. I'll see you on the next All Hands on Tech with your host, David Neal. I'll see you on the next one. Bye now.